Hello, and welcome to our channel. In today's video, we're diving into a critical issue, the fossil fuel industry's role in climate change. We'll be examining their early awareness of the problem, the steps they took to avoid taking action, and how this has shaped the climate crisis we face today. With real-life evidence and hard-hitting examples, we'll uncover how some of the biggest players in the fossil fuel sector not only knew about the dangers of their products, but worked actively to mislead the public and delay policy changes. By the end, you'll have a clearer understanding of how these companies have impacted our environment and why holding them accountable is more urgent than ever. We appreciate you watching and engaging with this important content. Your support helps us continue to tackle significant issues like these, so make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more. We look forward to hearing your thoughts and comments below. Together, we can push for the change that is needed. Climate change is not a recent phenomenon. In fact, as early as the 1950s, studies funded by the oil industry, including the American Petroleum Institute, began pointing to the connection between rising levels of carbon dioxide, CO2, and global warming. By the 1970s, fossil fuel companies like ExxonMobil were already aware of the serious risks that burning fossil fuels posed to the climate. Despite this knowledge, these companies chose to suppress their findings and continued to promote their products, knowingly contributing to global warming. Let's take a closer look at the timeline and evidence of this inaction. In the late 1950s, researchers funded by oil companies first started to observe the correlation between CO2 emissions and global temperature increases. By 1977, ExxonMobil's internal research explicitly confirmed the link between fossil fuel combustion and climate change. One of the most notable documents comes from ExxonMobil's own James Black, who predicted that continued fossil fuel usage would result in a rise in global temperatures of 1.5 to 2 degrees by 2050. Despite the clear evidence, ExxonMobil kept this information under wraps and continued to profit from oil and gas. Similarly, Shell also acknowledged the growing risks of climate change by 1988, but it did not take steps to advocate for action or inform the public about the urgency of the issue. Despite knowing the potential impact of climate change, fossil fuel companies began a concerted effort to discredit climate science. In 1989, the Global Climate Coalition (GCC) was formed, composed of major oil and gas companies, including ExxonMobil, Shell, and others. The purpose of the coalition was to undermine scientific consensus and oppose regulatory actions aimed at limiting greenhouse gas emissions. This campaign involved lobbying against international climate agreements, such as the Kyoto Protocol, and funding disinformation campaigns to confuse the public and policymakers. The companies also funded think tanks like the Heartland Institute, which promoted climate change denial and downplayed the risks associated with fossil fuel emissions. This disinformation campaign delayed meaningful policy responses and allowed the fossil fuel industry to continue operations without significant scrutiny or regulation. In the early 2000s, as the evidence for climate change became harder to ignore, fossil fuel companies began implementing greenwashing strategies. This involved presenting themselves as environmentally responsible despite continuing to invest heavily in fossil fuel exploration and extraction. A key example is BP's Beyond Petroleum campaign, launched in 2000. While BP rebranded itself as a company committed to renewable energy, the reality was that its investments in renewables remained a tiny fraction of its overall business, with fossil fuels still at the core of its operations. Similarly, ExxonMobil continued to promote its green initiatives while its core business operations remained focused on extracting and selling oil and gas. These greenwashing efforts were designed to improve public relations and avoid regulatory oversight while maintaining the same environmentally destructive practices. In recent years, there has been an increase in legal actions against fossil fuel companies for their role in climate change. Cities and states, particularly in the US, have filed lawsuits seeking to hold these companies accountable for the damages caused by climate change. Notably, New York City sued ExxonMobil in 2019, accusing the company of misleading investors about the financial risks posed by climate change. These lawsuits cite the company's internal documents, which reveal that ExxonMobil was aware of the risks but failed to disclose them publicly. Additionally, in 2021, a Dutch court ruled that Shell must reduce its carbon emissions by 45% by 2030, in line with the Paris Agreement. This was a landmark decision, showing that the legal system is beginning to hold fossil fuel companies accountable for their contributions to the climate crisis. However, while these legal actions are a promising step, they are still ongoing, and the outcomes of some lawsuits are yet to be determined. For example, the case of Honolulu suing oil companies has been discussed in public forums, but as of January 2025, no conclusive ruling has been made. Therefore, it's essential to follow updates from trusted sources for the latest legal developments. Fossil fuel companies' reluctance to act on climate change is primarily motivated by financial considerations. Taking action to reduce emissions would involve significant financial investments in renewable energy technologies, a shift away from fossil fuel dependence, and compliance with stricter environmental regulations. These changes would likely reduce profits, so the industry chose to prioritize immediate financial gains over long-term environmental sustainability. The ethical implications of this inaction are grave. The fossil fuel industry's failure to acknowledge and address the risks of climate change has disproportionately affected vulnerable communities around the world. Low-income groups, indigenous peoples, and small island nations are already bearing the brunt of climate-related disasters such as rising sea levels and extreme weather events, while the profits of these companies continue to rise. As we move into the future, there is a growing push to hold fossil fuel companies accountable for their actions. Legal actions, increasing public awareness, and the mounting costs of climate-related disasters are putting pressure on these companies to change. While some companies have begun to invest in renewable energy, the transition is still slow, and many continue to prioritize fossil fuel extraction over meaningful sustainability efforts. To achieve real progress, governments, activists, and consumers must work together to demand greater accountability from the fossil fuel industry. Legal challenges, like those being pursued by cities and states, alongside consumer pressure, are pushing the industry to reconsider its operations. However, for a truly sustainable future, these companies must be held responsible for the harm they've caused and make substantial investments in clean energy solutions. Thank you so much for watching this video and engaging with us on this important topic. Your support helps raise awareness of the fossil fuel industry's role in climate change, and together we can push for the changes necessary to protect our planet. If you found this content valuable, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel for more in-depth discussions on critical global issues. Let's continue the conversation in the comments below and work together to build a more sustainable future.